Hey everyone, J Rod Plays here. Today, I'll be putting together a video of kind of how I felt about the season of The Witch and how it ranked personally for me according to the other seasons that I've played. I'm not going to do a tier list or anything like that, but I'm just going to make sure that I'm kind of stacking it up and giving it that analysis that I would if I was comparing it to other good seasons. And I got to say, it's probably my favorite season outside of an expansion. So you had, for example, with Season of the Witch, Season of the Risen. That season and Season of the Witch are tied together so hard that it's really hard to separate them out. The Season of the Risen by itself is something that I would say not as great, but because it had the Witch Queen on top of it, you just had so much stuff to do because of the expansion that it turned out pretty good. That kind of combination of Risen and the Witch Queen expansion together worked out well. If it was one without the other, the Witch Queen expansion itself would have stood up fine, but I don't think Risen would have. And the other seasons that launched under Beyond Light and Shadowkeep kind of felt the same. It felt like that season maybe not have been by itself a great season, but because it was tied into those expansions, that those seasons were fine. And so the fact that Season of the Witch kind of stacks up well alongside some of that type of scenario where there's just a lot to do and it's really tied in to what you're doing since it's tied into the expansion. Really, the Season of the Witch felt like it could have been its own little mini expansion just because of the way that they did a good job of tying in what you were doing in the season with the actual activities that it launched alongside. And on top of that, having this really cool kind of investigatory feel that you got from the Witch Queen extended into a season that was not Witch Queen related necessarily. Obviously, it's related to the Witch Queen Sabathun, but I'm talking seasonally. It's Lightfall, so it's supposed to be related to the Lightfall, but it really felt like you pulled it out of the year of the Witch Queen and you kind of set it outside of the Lightfall. And it felt so separate from Lightfall in the sense that it was just really good because Lightfall was really not good overall. Just the way that they package things and they rush things in the story. And I'm not going to kind of rehash all of that, but everybody is kind of in like a similar agreement that Lightfall was not what it was cracked up to be, for example. So having said that it's one of my favorite seasons, I still have those pros and cons that I want to go over. So that way, you can see that even though this was one of the better seasons, it still could have been even better on top of it. Like there were still some things where they missed the mark on, I think, that really would have made it like over the top, like maybe the best season. And so, the first thing I want to go over is just the positives. So let's talk about the pros. I like the lore. I like the fact that it was tied to Savathun. I've always enjoyed her lore and the way that she kind of weaves herself in and out of the story. It's specifically how they did it this season, where we were getting these weird like radio messages. It was kind of like a break in the action a little bit to get these radio messages, but it was nice to have them because Savathun's voice actress, who's been around a long time, she does such a great job at portraying Savathun herself, and so it was nice to get that little touch to get Deborah's Savathun interpretation and get it to the point where it's almost like she's there next to us in the room talking whenever we're sitting there listening to some of these recordings. Or having Amaru play some of the recordings for her. Amaru's voice actor did a great job as well, and Amaru himself as a character is a great character, I think. They could have been a little bit more aggressive with Amaru. He was a little bit muted to me. He could have been a little bit more rude at times or a little bit more specific in his critiques. He was just kind of overall just talking trash, but I think he could have definitely called out things much better, just like he was. There was an exchange with Eris Morn and Amaru where they kind of went back and forth. I think it would have been nice to have Amaru like pick at every single major character like that, like to pick it at Korra, to pick at other people. And I know they could threaten Amaru, and Amaru would shut up because Amaru's a little bit of a coward at some time. But there wasn't a whole lot of interaction between him and Ghost, between him and Glint that could have happened. Especially with the way that everything is tied together with Crow. Crow could have been a little bit more involved in this season. I know they're trying to save money on voice actors because you don't want to pack too many people and too many voice actors into one area, but Crow did have that whole revelation when he touched Savathun and reminded him who he was as Zoldran and kind of saw all of that. So him having some conversation with Amaru too would have been great, especially if his conversation was like kind of on the edge of like he might actually kill Amaru and ruin this whole thing. Like that would have been a nice little kind of side story to look out for. Always him on the edge of bubbling over a little bit. But Bungie, they do a good job of being very focused and specific, and I think that might have also thrown people off a little bit, having that additional side kind of uh, confrontation between one of our major characters and one of our side characters. I just thought it would have been cool personally. I would have liked that. I don't know how it would have played widely though. Um, so I definitely enjoyed seeing how Savathun's machinations worked behind the scenes, essentially peeling back the layers of what she was doing the whole time in the background and working towards and kind of laying foundationally this whole situation. While we were busy dealing with all these other threats to the universe, she was doing this with her Embaro engine and getting that built to give her this additional power to have her rival, even the Witness. And that was kind of her essential goal, was to be the big bad herself so that she couldn't be destroyed. And obviously she didn't get there because we stopped her, but that was cool that she had at least the balls to even try that, right? Against something like the Witness, because she understands how strong the Witness's powers are in comparison to Rolk, in comparison to a lot of the other major entities in Destiny, like the Nine, for example, like all of the major entities that were involved with the Fundament story. Things that you would think have this immense power, like the Leviathan in that race, like the Worm Gods, and then they get dwarfed by stuff like Rolk, and then Rolk gets dwarfed by the Witness to kind of give you that power scale. And so they have like a little bit of that DBZ thing going on where, like, power levels over a certain amount and it just is almost unreadable, and that's kind of where they put the Witness. And I understand why they have to do that, because he's the big bad. He's supposed to be equal to the Traveler. He's an entire society based on the kind of the retcon. He's an entire society of people, so his force of nature is much stronger than just a single person. Although the Guardian is getting there with its pure causality and the way that they're building the Guardian up and putting people behind the Guardian to kind of prop up our Guardian, per se, to get to that level, to get to that power level that's equivalent to the Witness. So I really do enjoy how they're doing that. Again, we'll tweak it a little here and there, but since I'm not on the writing table and I'm not somebody that can just say, no, we're doing it this way, we got to kind of experience it how they want us to experience it, how they hashed it out, and kind of compromise, because I'm sure that there may be some people that were similar and close to what I'm talking about. They just didn't get their ideas across because they want to make sure that it's commercially acceptable to many people, not just to like a one specific group of people. So there is that. Um, the next thing that I want to talk about is the deck, for example. I really liked the deck and the way that the deck changed the new little progression area that we had the in the Athenaeum realm and Savathun's throne world that we had, that little area that we cut out where you can kind of see Savathun in the background, or her essence in the background. And Eris Morn was essentially allowed to grow into her own hive god in that area. And so that was another cool, obviously, aspect of that is, Eris being a hive god, but I'll get to that in a second. Going back to the deck, I really liked how the deck would change and add new little aspects all along each time you were able to find something secret. And I really enjoyed how they weave those secrets into the two activities. So you had to go into the altar of summoning, you had to go into the spire to find these cards, and each week you got a chance to attune to a certain element and go in there and clear everything that you could, and then you would come back and do the same thing the next week and the same thing the next week, and you kind of knew what you were doing, but it would change slightly. Another really nice kind of hint that they put in there, that nice little difference that they could have done. They could have had the same exact thing happen for each person each week when it came to the elemental attunements. But what ended up happening was each time that you took an elemental attunement, depending on the week, it was actually slightly different that next week for somebody doing a different elemental attunement. So that was really cool. I like how they did that, because they could have just easily copped out and just copy and pasted over 3 weeks, but they didn't. Like the first week was a certain experience, the second week was a certain experience, and the third week was a certain experience, and each of the different elements got a different way of experiencing that and a different place to experience that in. And that was really cool how they did that. So that was actually very well thought out, I think, and how they were able to give each path, each kind of choice, its own little difference in how it interacted with the season, almost like a choose your own adventure. You know what I mean? And I wish that they could do that more often with more seasons. And I hope that they can do that with the new story content that's coming after the final shape, because having that freedom, that almost little bit of open world, open design, where you can get in there and make your choice. And while you'll end up in the same place in the end, you take your own path and your own way, and it's just a little different and slightly different, and piece it together. I know that as a content creator, going and gathering all the different views of how it looks for each week was really cool, and trying to tie that into my videos for my weekly guides. And so that's something that I just, as a content creator, really appreciated, how they had that slight little difference, because it gives us that additional story to tell whenever we have a chance to make those videos. Somebody like myself making guide videos, that was actually a really nice touch. Going back to the space that we created in the throne world, having that secret card in there, that was a really nice touch. Having it essentially grow and allowing us to turn on and off cards depending on what we wanted to do for the week, because then you could focus on your element for the week. You could pick a build that you like and then go and turn on cards that were specifically going to help your build in the altars of summoning. And so that was a really nice touch as well. That was again something that they didn't have to do. They didn't have to go to that length, I think. But since they did, that really gave this season, that really additional tailored touch to it, and that to me brought it alive even more, having that ability to go in there and select those things. Now they failed at not having a description of what it does, because you clearly can walk up to it and you can see the description of what it is. And obviously on the top you can see the little icon, and if you can remember what the icon does, you can remember. But it would be a nice little touch that whenever you get that little pop-up message at the bottom left, instead of just saying you drew blades, it could say you drew blades and heavy ammo is generated on kills. Just something a little right behind it, hit dash, and then here's what it does, dash, and here's what it does. And it wouldn't have taken that much more technically for them to do that. And that would have been like a nice little chef's kiss on it, because that's one of the cons, was that you couldn't see what the card did right up front. A lot of people didn't like that and got confused by it. I was okay with it. I figured out my own little way of remembering my own pneumatic device, but not everybody has that ability, and not everybody wants to put effort into that in the first place. So some people just want to have it right there in front of them, so that they're like, all right, I drew this. This is what I'm going to do to take advantage of this card that I drew. And then having the ability to redraw, which at first I thought it was saying like once a day, but I guess you can just do it once per activity. And that was really nice, that you can go there and redraw. And then later on, I believe you got additional redraws. Usually I would only redraw once and then just say whatever, just keep whatever it was. It wasn't that big of a deal to not get blades every time, for example, which when you did get blades was fantastic, because you could just run around with your heavy out and just lay waste to everything, and that was a lot of fun. So that's a really cool aspect of it. I enjoyed the gameplay loop. I really did. I enjoyed having that ability to go into Spire, get what you need, go into the Altars of Summoning, get what you need, come back, uncover the cards, go into the Embaro engine, and then do the Embaro engine. Like once we unlocked the Embaro engine, that really took it to another level, I think. Having that new area, that new activity, this new secret that feels like there could just be something right on the edge of what you're looking for, and probably had a lot of people just running around and scanning things and doing a little bit of raid secrets type activities in the Embaro engine just to see if there was anything secret. Sadly there wasn't until the very last week, whenever everybody got together and they were able to figure out what the sequence was for that final Embaro engine test. And I really like the fact that they did have the King Morph for that third card, so that way we can actually have that little nice closed bookend of three Embaro engine challenges, and then they went and they did this additional secret one on top of it. So not only was it like, hey, we were right about the fact that there was a third card in there, but not only were we right about the fact that there was a third card in there, boom, there was a fourth one. And this fourth one was this doozy of a one where everybody had to join together to figure out what it was based on these other parts of the Embaro engine and activities that you could find it in. And so that's really cool that they did that. And I'm really actually amazed at how fast the Embaro engine was solved, because I wasn't able to get on right away. And by the time that I got on that Tuesday, they'd already figured out what the code was. So I was able to just go in there and read and raid secrets and say they did this, this, and this, and this. And I was like, well, that's amazing. Well, here's the code. Let me make this video, right? And get the video out. So again, for a content creator, fantastic that they were able to do that, because yeah, I could have made a whole video on how to do that and do it yourself, but who wants to go through all that and get together a group of people, a bunch of people, and just grind through all these truth and lies? Yes, it's fun, but at that time in the season, we'd already been dealing with revealing things over and over and over again. I don't think anybody was too sad that they solved it that quickly. I think everybody was rather pleased with the fact that they were able to get on and get along and finish the story, and then open up that final little scene where you can see the Ahamkara egg and go into the cutscene to find the final wish. I think that was actually really cool, and how they did that to tie into the next season. The timing in which they released it was a little dubious. I feel like they had to release it early. I feel like it wasn't going to be released until this week or last week. How Bungie likes to do things, but because of all of the stuff going on that we'll talk about in a different video, right? That they had to probably push it a little forward to try to distract players from all the sad stuff that was going on behind the scenes. That really hurt the way that Bungie as a studio looks and the way that Destiny's future looks. And the fact that they had to do that was a little bit sad, but it was our win in the end. I'm glad they did it because we had more time to share with that with people, and they probably thought the community puzzle was going to take a lot longer than it did and keep us busy, but joke was on them. Either way, good pacing, worked out well. It would have sucked to have to wait weeks and weeks. I wouldn't have even been as enthused about that season ending area. Like the last little fourth Embaro engine and the cutscene and all that, as I would have been at the time. So the timing just worked well whenever they had to release it, whether it was planned or not. It worked out. I enjoyed the variety of encounters between the secrets that you could find in the Spire and the bosses in the Spire, between the same secrets you can find in the Altar of Summoning and all of the different Altar of Summoning encounters, especially the Altar of Summoning, like in between encounters, the Tithe with Haste stuff. That was pretty cool when it first spawned you for the first time and you were like, what the hell's going on? I also liked how it built to a chest, and then you got the chest, and you could stay in there. That was really cool that you could do it either for just like an hour, for 30 minutes, and get out, or you could sit there and grind all day, which sadly you had to do sometimes for some of the things, right? And you were trying to get all the stuff quickly. As a content creator, I had to get in there and spend a lot of time in there, getting all the encounters, figuring all the encounters. I wish there was a way to pick the encounter versus just getting a random encounter. I wish you could like spin one extra thing and like determine exactly what encounter you want, especially when it came to Zebu's Brood. That's like a glaring con. The fact that Zebu's Brood trying to get that final encounter, where you had to be in the new area where it spawned, where you ended up ending the kind of that final sequence against the Light Eater, right? You had to be in that area, and then you had like a 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 chance of getting that encounter. And so that was just absolute shit. That should never occur. Like, to be tied to an achievement like that, where you have to sit and just leave the, like, again, keep this in mind. This was how you had to actually get it done. I made a video on it. You had to leave again and again, leaving people doing these encounters with 2 players instead of 3 as they were designed, and go back, join again, try to get that room. And if you got the room, then you had to go in and pray by dropping the tier 2 offering, because the tier 3 offering apparently for whatever reason was had like a higher chance of it being one of the other encounters. And so it was just like a lucky thing, I guess, or if it was true the tier 2 thing was getting more people the Zeus Brood encounter, including myself. Like one of the first tier 2, like I think it was like 3 or 4 times by the time I got in there, because it took me forever to just get that. I think it was like the third one in. At first I did a tier 3, didn't get it. Then I did a tier 2, didn't get it. And then I did a second tier 2 and I got it when I was finally able to get that room. So there might be something to that, because then the tier 3 didn't give it to me. And if I remember, I might have even done another tier 3, because I was just so pissed at how many times I had to load into this Altars of Summoning. I spent more time loading into the Altars of Summoning than I did playing the game that entire day. Like I was so done with having to load again and again and again into the game that I was like, all right, once I got this, I was out for the day. Like I just logged out and I said no thanks, and I came back and like, let me do something later, because of that experience. So when you have that scenario and you're so put off that you just don't even want to play the game anymore, like that's poor design right there. That's an absolute con. And I can go now into some of the other cons now that we kind of talked about a lot of the pros. I want to make sure the video is not super, super long, so I'm going to go into the cons. The first of the cons to me was that most of the weapons were mid. Like they were not anything great. Like some of them were good. They kept confidence, for example. Some of them were good. The rocket launcher had potential to be good. That was the first one that I finished when it comes to getting my pattern because I was really just focusing on that rocket launcher to try to get it to see how well it did with Envious Assassin. And it was okay. It wasn't anything fantastic or anything spectacular. Like, Bry's Love, I believe, is what the scout was called. That one was, to me, a more used weapon than the rocket launcher in the end. And even that weapon, there was other weapons that are better than it. But if you got a destabilizing, I think rapid hit roll, if I remember correctly, with that one. But essentially, the stabilizing, it can be really nice with the proper subclass when you have a void subclass and you're running around with devour and stuff. It was pretty cool. But again, you have to really spec into your entire class to make that weapon work. Whereas some other weapons in the game, they just kind of work no matter what class you're in. And all of these weapons that you had to pretty much spec around. There was no weapons this season that weapon alone, regardless of what your class is, you're going to be rocking that weapon. It's going to be, I rock this weapon and this class, or I'm using this weapon to get this bounty done, for example. And that was essentially what we were working on. So that was one sad thing. It would have been nice to have at least one strong weapon, like one really like top tier weapon out of all of those. And some of them got to like an A tier, but there was no S tier. And the A tier again you had to work at. So that's one of the major cons. Another major con, talking about the altars of summoning like we did, I think there was like a week or two where there were just some awful modifiers. Like I think it's grounded is the name of the modifier where you can't jump or you take increased damage. Like that has no business being in a game mode where you have enemy units running at you that are exploder units, enemy units that can slam the ground, enemy units that can sneak up on you and swarm you. Because the only way you get away from those units is either with an ability or jumping. And so you take away jumping, which we spend so much time into the air, and you essentially get yourself insta kill because you jumped up. So many of the units do so much damage in Altar of Summonings. It was just a really sad and really annoying week. Like I went in there, I got what I needed done, and then I was out. Like I couldn't grind any longer because it was not fun. I was playing with randoms like everybody else normally does whenever you just queue in there. I don't imagine many people got a fire team together for that unless that week was the week that somebody did need help with the fire team and they were in Fire Team Finder trying to get that. And so that is one of the things that I think they need to look at is whenever they have an encounter built a certain way, they can't put something like grounded in there or famine and grounded together or famine and grounded and closer together all in the same week, which is like I feel like that's what it was. Like you had no ammo, you had to be right next to your teammates who were always running away from you because again, randoms, and you couldn't jump. So just a miserable experience that week for me. And I think I had another week like that where I just like was like, nope, I'm out. No thanks. Like I can do it. I have the skill to do it. Yes, I've solo flawless dungeons. I've solo grandmasters. You know what I mean? Like obviously I can do it, but it's just not a thing that I want to put time into. You know what I mean? It's just not fun to me. Like I don't get a kick out of sitting there for hours and dying over and over again just to get this one thing and just to get this one video to say that I did this thing, right? Because that's just not who I am as a content creator, and it's also not who I am as a person. Like I'm not going to sit down there and grind and grind and grind and grind against something just to say I did this really hard thing that nobody else can do because I put enough time into it. Because it's one thing to walk in there and get it done in one shot and do it the very first time and record that and prove it. Like that's impressive. Like if you can go into like a GM for the first time and nobody's ever played that GM and you go in there solo and you solo flawless it, that's nice. But if you solo flawless the GM after like, I don't know, 10 hours of hitting it and dying over and over and over again, but you only put up the one good run, and you're like, look at me, I solo flawless this thing that took me 2 days worth of, or 3 days worth of gameplay just to get done because it's hard and not everybody can do it. Yes, it's an achievement, but am I impressed? Not really, because I can do the same thing. So it's one of those things where, you only have so much time and effort to put into this hobby of ours as a Destiny player, right? Like our basically it's a hobby to be a guardian. And if it's going to be so miserable that it's going to make me not want to play the game anymore, you have to really rethink that and say, okay, we can't do this again. Like this is something that just can't be done in a future season, period. Another con that I had, and really the last major con, was I didn't like how the story kind of ended up, like, I was really sad how Eris wasn't like massive, like she was all small compared to Savathun. I wanted her to be this like huge, massive hive god, and really just encapsulate hive god. Maybe she could have even been like in a place where like would have really been cool, like in the Hellmouth, for example. Like we could have gone and taken her and implanted her down in Crota's throne room, and she's there like attached to Crota's throne room, and she has this revitalized oversoul, and she's just massive, and she's just generating her own hive and stuff, and just doing this cool hivey god stuff in order to overcome this massive force that Zevor is. Like that would have just been cool to do something like that, like to have her have like this really otherworldly look to her. But instead, she got this cool little armor, right? And she transformed this cool little armor, and she took like some weird weapon that we've never seen before, some like axe handle hammer thing, and hit Savathun in the throat, which killed her, which also didn't look super convincing. Like really, like this one little thing is gonna kill Savathun. You know what I mean? Like if all we had to do was shoot her in the throat in the expansion, that would have been a little anticlimactic, just like this was anticlimactic. And I really think that the way that they handled her separating Ziva Roth and us not even seeing Ziva Roth was a big miss for me. I mean, I'm not going to let that taint the entire season, but that was just sad. Like, I wanted to see her huge. I wanted to have her own throne world in the sense of like having this massive, grandiose display of hive power, and she didn't have that. We didn't have that, and we had the opportunity. We had the places that we cleared out that could have, and we just didn't do it. So, she didn't get to look Ziva Roth eye to eye, for example. She didn't crush Ziva Roth. Like she could have killed Zebu's avatar at least something, but she didn't. We didn't have like that final mission that put us in that situation where we're like running in between Savathun and Zebu Roth as they're locking up. Kind of like a kaiju movie, like a Godzilla movie, right between these two hive gods, and we're fighting, hive all underneath their legs and stuff as they're stomping around, and there's even a chance of us getting stomped on by one of them and dying. Like that would have just been such a cool thing for them to put in the game, but they didn't. They went with this weird little cutscene, and they did the whole, these little stars in Savathun's wing, and that ended up being how everything ended up. So it is what it is. The season was a great season. Ended on kind of a meh note, but overall, like I said, it wasn't like a 10 out of 10. It was probably like an 8 out of 10. But like I said, probably my favorite season outside of any expansion, and I hope that you guys really enjoyed it as well. Now I'm going to be making a video about the season of The Wish. We have some information came out recently that kind of helped mold what we think the season of The Wish is going to look like. So I'm going to make a video for my expectations of the upcoming season of The Witch, and that'll probably be out tomorrow. And I'm going to try to also have the expectation video out on Sunday for you guys, if not Monday at the latest, of course, because we'll be going into the season on Tuesday. And so thanks very much for watching to the end. I really appreciate everybody. I really appreciate, again, all my new subscribers. And if you really enjoyed this video, you've made it all the way in, please subscribe. Please leave me a like. Please leave me a comment letting me know you made it all the way through. And I'll see you guys in the next video.